2 o'clock and good afternoon. It's a real pleasure to welcome everyone to the March 9th, 2023 briefing. We'll actually be preparing for our March 16th, 2023 regular meeting. And today we are fortunate that we have actually two discussion items. One, we're going to have a brief presentation on the Piedmont Triad International Airport Authority, a report, an update. And we're going to talk some with the Winston-Forsyth County Schools Finance Officer, Tommy Krantz, about our quarter-cent sales tax report. So, with no further ado, it is a pleasure to introduce our appointees, the county's appointee, Graham Bennett, to the Piedmont Triad International Airport Authority, and he is going to introduce Executive Director, Mr. Baker. So, Graham, you can come right on up.
We'll come up together.
All right, great.
Because mine's going to be very short because you'll hear the meat of it from Kevin Baker. Thank you for allowing us to come today to give you a quick and brief update on the good things that are happening at Piedmont Triad Airport. I represent y'all on the board, and it's been an honor and pleasure to do so, particularly with the late announcements and a couple big things that we have cooking that hopefully we'll announce soon that will be a pleasure to y'all. You know, I will just say quickly that most airports are more passenger and airplane centric. We are a little different, as Gloria will tell you, as she has been a mighty fine, valued member of the PTI board, is that we're more of a jobs creator and a business development airport, mainly because of the forethought of all the folks that are before us in regard to having shovel-ready land. And that has become an extremely valuable piece today when people want to make a decision quick, and we're able to give them that. So, and I think that the other thing I'd like to point out is we have a lot more land ready for future potential bigger and better announcements in the future. So it's a great economic driver for the community. I'm proud to serve on it, and you're going to hear the meat of what the good news that we're doing, and particularly in regards to the level of jobs and the salary levels that we have from Kevin Baker, who is our executive director and really the brains behind all what is going on over there. So thank you for the time today.
Thanks, Graham. Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, thank you so much for having us both here today. I would just start with the fact that really all of our appointing bodies, as you're going to see a slide here in a moment, but it's the three cities and the two counties that appoint to the airport authority. And we have traditionally gotten some of the best people sent to us to be board members for the airport. Case in point. And that makes it so much easier for us to succeed, for us to be able to do the things that we need to do, and to have very smart people from all different areas of expertise that can really help us. And it's just been so nice to have a constant crew of 7 really smart individuals there to help us. So I'm going to show you a few slides. I'm not going to get into too much detail, but mainly the focus is going to be just showing you a little bit of the organization. I see a lot of familiar faces up here, but there are new ones as well. So for those who maybe are not familiar with the way the airport works, just going to spend a couple slides talking about that. And then get into air service. It's a big topic out there, and how it's very hard to find flights, especially ones that are cheaper these days. Talk about that, talk about where that's headed. And then I'm going to spend a lot more time on our economic development pursuits, what's going on, the wins that we've had recently, and where we might be going in the future. Yeah, perfect, works. So I've already mentioned that the authority is owned by Piedmont Triad Airport Authority. There are 7 members, and you can see the members on here. 1 each appointed by the 3 cities. 1 appointed by you all, and then 3 appointed by the Guilford County Commissioners. And the reason for that is that Guilford County is the only of those 5 bodies that the airport sits in. This is a misnomer. A lot of times, especially folks from Greensboro, it's called the Greensboro Airport, etc. There's not 1 square foot of the airport that is in Greensboro or High Point or Winston, for that matter. It's all in Guilford County. But, right now, the Western Piedmont is well represented with Alan Joins and Graham both in senior positions on our board, and just great board members like the rest of them as well. So Graham touched on this a little bit, but I want this to be maybe the main takeaway that you get from these words today. Think of this airport not as the traditional airport. An airport you think of normally as a place of transportation, right? It's a place where you go and get on a plane, your loved ones maybe go on a plane, your packages, shipping things, get on a plane. We have all that, and we are that traditional airport. We have that piece. But probably 80% of my job is spent on the economic development side for the second part of this mission, which is spending time to make sure that we're ready to find, pursue, and bring home large employers in the aerospace industry. And some examples will follow. The airport is financially independent, so there's not a single tax dollar that goes into funding the operation of this airport from any of the 5 bodies that we've been talking about, or from the state, or from the federal government. All of our revenues are generated by the tenants, so we get revenue from the airlines, we get revenues from the concessionaires that are in a building, to the extent that people come in and they're parking, we get that revenue. If they're buying something, we'll get a piece of that gross from the concessionaire. Rental cars, we get a piece of that gross as well. That's where all of our revenue is coming from. You can see at the bottom, I've included fiscal year 20 numbers because it's really the last one that is representative of anything normal. Because starting after that, in 2020, obviously we went to zero practically for a while, from about March 15th all the way through end of May. That's come back some. We're struggling to get back to where we were, but we're heading in the right direction right now. But you can see back in a normal year, we were about a $40 million business. We had about $20 million in expenses. So your gross revenue, if you want to look at it that way, is, or your net on that is about $20 million. And we had a little bit of debt service, $6 million a year. And then the remainder of that money that's left over at the end of the day is plugged back into airport operations. So it's going back to making sure the carpets look good, making sure the lights are on, all the things that we need to do. Let me update you a little bit on air service. So first of all, I'll show you this first slide. So this is a quote from Scott Kirby, who's the CEO of United Airlines. It was December of 21 when he said this. We have almost 100 airplanes effectively grounded right now, regional aircraft, because there's not enough pilots to fly them, which means we just can't at the moment fly to all the small communities that we would like to. One of those regional airplanes is a plane that would serve our market from here to Dulles and Dulles back to here. That airplane has been grounded. It's not flying. Therefore, we don't have service to Dulles Airport right now. So this is what has happened. And the way that this all really started was during COVID, in those same months, May, June, July of 2020, the airlines said, wow, we got a real problem. Nobody's flying. We got all these crews sitting around doing nothing. We've got to kind of find a solution for this. And they did an awful lot of early furlough stuff, early retirements. And what happened was then a lot of senior captains left, and then the more junior captains moved up into those chairs. But what was left unfilled were those starter pilots' positions. And at that time, since everything was shut down, the pilot training had come to a complete stop, right? So you've got no people to fly these airplanes. There had been a pilot problem, a pilot shortage problem, even before COVID. COVID just made it 10 times worse. So what has happened is exactly what I described to you about this United situation in Dulles. It will come back. It's going to take time. Ed Bastian, who's the CEO of Delta, says he thinks it could take 5 years. He made that quote about a year and a half ago. So we're chipping away at that time, but there's still time to go. Right now, where are we? Let's give you an update as to where we are. In terms of passengers, we're measuring everything against 2019. Now, there's a little bit of a misnomer here because 2019 was an outstanding year. If you were watching through the teens, watching our numbers, it was steady growth, 16, 17, 18, coming up in 19, it was a spike, real big spike. So that year was, we were all looking forward to 2020 because if 19 was doing what it was doing, let's look for 2020 to be even better. And we all know what happened in the early months of 2020. So even comparing against 19 isn't necessarily fair. 18 might be the best year to compare against because it was the last normal growth year. But having said that, we do compare against 19. And you can see that our passengers are, between 75 and 80% of 2019 numbers right now. So we're getting closer to being back. You're going to hear other airports are back and over. The hub airports are back. They're back. And that's because the airlines are going to make sure that they're feeding those hubs. When we lose that service to Dulles, they're going to make sure that they've got service from Dulles to other hubs. So that's not going to change. We're trending right now towards a 90% of 2019 passenger load by the end of this calendar year. Our revenue is another story, and this is mainly part of the dichotomy of our operation that you've heard a couple times now. We have a lot of people on the airfield that aren't dealing with passengers and flying people around. They're building airplanes, they're maintaining airplanes, they're shipping packages, FedEx. There's a number of those who are fixing airplanes. So they kept on working. And they're still working strong. And that revenue is very strong, while the airline revenue has dropped off and the passenger-generated revenue has dropped off just a little bit. So where we're trending is that by the end of this year, our revenue will be back above where we were in 2019. So from a financial standpoint, we're in good shape. As I said on here, some of the flights still have not returned, and it's just going to be a matter of time. There's a lot of industry positive moves that have been happening in the last few months. The 777s were all grounded for about a year, and those airplanes are starting to come back into service. And what happens with those is the 777s are mainly long-haul overseas aircraft. When they're sitting somewhere, then smaller airplanes have to take those spots, like a 767 or something like that. Then wherever that 76 was serving is now getting served by something smaller as well. And this is just pushing down through, right? And you see the problems. You start to feel the way that things are with the airlines. With them coming back in, and so back in August, Boeing started redelivering the 787, also a large aircraft. But then they just last week, I wish I'd have waited until after I did this presentation, you guys. But just last week, they stopped it again for another problem. But I think that they've solved the 737 MAX problem. I think we're seeing more airplanes back in, and they had record numbers of new pilots trained at the end of last year. All of this is beneficial. All of this is positive, and hopefully it'll get back a little faster than some think. And we are seeing an up-gauging trend at the airport, which is great because instead of having a regional jet, you'll have, say, a 737. Now, instead of flying 8 regional jets a day, they might be flying 5 737s because you can hold the same amount of people even with that reduced amount of planes. But they're larger aircraft, can carry a lot more people, and the total seats that we have towards the end of the year will be stronger than they have been since 19. So all of that looking good. So shifting to economic development, these are all facts. They're not my facts. These facts come from the state of North Carolina. The airport has a $9 billion annual impact to the state. There's 8,600 people who are working on the airport right now. And those are direct employees on the airport there right now, every day. And that's made up of, a lot of times folks will say, who is that? Well, you've got Honda, HAECO, Cessna, FedEx. Those 4 right there are probably at about 4,600. The airlines, and we have 125 FTEs. I mean, the airport authority is very small, but the airlines probably have a total of 800 or so. And then you've got smaller tenants on and off the airport. But, 8,600 people makes us the 5th largest employer in the triad. It's pretty strong and something to be invested in. Average salary, $70,000 to $75,000. The average salary that we studied last, average household income, that we studied last in a 40-mile radius of the airport was 52,000, I think was the number. So here you've got an average single earner who's making fully 150% of what average household income is. And remember, household income could be 2 people, 2 earners. So the message is there's a lot of jobs and they're good jobs. These are jobs that are going to raise the bar, raise average household income for the community. Just to make one more point on this, if you took the 8,600 direct jobs and multiply that by the low side of the average salary, 70,000, you get around $600 million. $600 million in salaries from people who are working on this airport and who are living in our communities. Let me talk about that for a second. The last time we've done 2 community surveys in the last 10 years. The first time we did it, of the people who worked on the airport, 60% of them lived in Guilford County, 20% of them lived in Forsyth County, the other 20 lived in the other counties of the Triad. Of the 20 that were in Forsyth County, it was split evenly 10 and 10 between those who also live in Winston-Salem and those who live outside the city limits. In Greensboro, it was half of them lived in Greensboro, 1/6 of them lived in High Point, and then the rest were all out in Guilford County. Those numbers have changed. I find this very interesting. They've changed, and Forsyth County was at 25 now. So it's growing. I think what's happening is because there's so many opportunities, people from the further away communities are seeing the opportunity and are coming in. This county grew to 25, and then the other counties grew to 25, and Guilford County dropped back to 50. So, this is, again, an important employer, and it's for the whole region, not just Guilford County, for sure. Let me just move on. I've already made those points. So being able to say yes, this was my mantra. Want to absolutely, anytime somebody comes to us, Boeing walks in the door and they say, we need 200 acres. We need it to be next to a road. Here, I think my next slide shows you all this. There you go. 80 acres, next to a road, no environmental problems, utilities to the site. We need it flat. We want it next Friday and we want it for free. Can you name that too? And this is the kind of stuff that we get. I mean, any of the economic developers would tell you this. It is a really rough competition. You got to be ready to play this game, or you're out, period. And so, our goal, and we set up a plan, and, Graham made a point about how long this has been going. And I keep on saying that we're standing on the shoulders of giants. If you go back even 50 years, decisions that were made at that point have led to our ability to do what we're doing now. 20 years ago, they said, let's go buy a golf course. And said, why are we going to buy a golf course? What are we going to do with that? Well, one day that's going to be land that we can expand into. Right now, that could end up being part of a very big project that we're looking at. So about 10 years ago, though, we set out to say, let's always be able to say yes. Because I was losing sleep over if that Boeing comment came in and we would have to say no, or they're open in South Carolina, go down there. And so what we did was came up with a plan at that time that would open up 1,000 acres of land that is on the west side of the airport. And there's a lot more details to this, and I'm happy to get into exactly the whole plan at any time with any one of you, singly or together. I won't take your time here unless you ask me to do it at the end. I'll certainly go through it. But I'd love to tell you the deeper story. But what you see here on your screen is that 1,000 acres of land. And in the middle, you see our taxiway bridge, and that's I-73 cutting through the middle. So if you just imagine that we get taxiways built parallel to the runway, you can see the runway in the background here, and then a taxiway that comes out and over the bridge that is 73, all of a sudden, what we get here is 1,000 acres of land opened up to be able to develop. This is the same image, but turned around 180 degrees. So you're now over the airport looking back towards Winston, basically to the west. And you can just see a number of the different sites that we have on there. The boom site is the triangular one that's down in the middle, right in the center. That's only 65 acres out of all this 1,000 acres, and that could be 2,000 employees. We look at things like that, employee density. When we're looking at these companies to bring in, we'd rather have someone who's going to have 2,000 employees on 60 acres than have 20 employees on 600 acres, right? Because you're making better, efficient use of your land. And you can actually see on here some other projects that we are pursuing right now that I think you're going to hear announcements about soon. Honestly, I'd say one of them in the next 2 months and one of them by summer. And they're going to be other exciting projects. So hang on, we'll see how they come out. But boom, very quickly, obviously, our big news from last year, and right now their building is under construction. That's projected to have a little over $32 billion of impact, 2,400 employees in the area. They already moved a bunch of people into town, so they're getting started and making some big investments. And that would be just, that's my last slide, that would be just an image of what the building might look like with the airplanes out on the ramp. I will tell you one thing here, because there have been some folks who have asked questions about this being a startup company, obviously. If you look at that hangar in the background, so this is meant to be an assembly line. And so therefore, the airplanes move down the length of it. There's 4 positions where the first position, they get the wings put on and the wheels put on. The next one, they come down, they get the tail section put on. The next one, they do whatever's next, and, then finish the airplane. We have required them to build this with what we termed alternative utility. So in the event that, for whatever reason, they are not in this hangar anymore, the building could be used for other purposes. If you look at the building, you can see these kind of doghouse things that are sticking out the side of the building. Can you all see those on your screens? So what they are they actually do call them doghouses. Imagine if we don't need to use this as an assembly line. We have a whole bunch of MRO, maintenance, repair, and overhaul work, HAECO, that kind of work that goes on at the airport. These guys will be able to take down the walls on the back side of the building, put up hangar doors, and then be able to pull airplanes into where you see each one of those nose docks. So that's the kind of forethought that they're putting into it to make sure that we have a reuse potential in the event that something were to go awry here. So basically the way I would put it is that every dollar that's getting spent on that project is completely hedged. And with that, I have no further things to talk about, but I would love to hear any questions and hopefully give you good answers.
I'd like to ask him. I shouldn't even be sitting here because my imagination runs wild. I go back to when it used to be known as the Greensboro, High Point, Winston-Salem Airport at Friendship. And then it became PTI. And in this particular community, we have Smith Reynolds Airport. And you just mentioned moving in a westward mode right now. And by the way, we're on the westward part of what you're doing. So I hesitate because it could be embarrassing to me and to others who say, no, well, that's a great idea, because I don't know what I'm talking about. But Guilford County and Forsyth County and Graham Bennett is a wonderful example of the kind of people we can produce here and that we've got here. But I keep thinking to myself, Piedmont Triad International Airport, is it way off the page to even consider a merger between Smith Reynolds Airport and PTI?
Yeah, so there are a number of airport systems in the country that manage multiple airports. Normally, those are under cities or counties, and the cities or counties manage all of those assets. There are few, but very few airport authorities, which is how we're set up, that do the same. And the authority is the most, of all the different business arrangements for the organizations for airports, the authority is the most efficient by far. I think that there's not as much to be gained as you might guess of joining the two airports together. I mean, I've seen it done elsewhere, and a lot of times it can just be a distraction to each of their main focus, because you can get into competition for people, for time, that kind of thing. So, while we're always happy to look at anything, I'm just not sure that it's the best solution for either of the airports.
Kevin, speak a little bit of the close relationship that you have with helping them to help. We have a good relationship.
Yeah.
Business relationship.
Yeah, thank you. That's something I missed completely there. I mean, we work together very closely. If there's, if we have a project that needs a certain site, let's say, and it has very specific needs, maybe needs one small hangar, we don't have whatever, then I call Mark and say, Mark, here's an option for you. There's also the stuff that's going on over there with AeroX, and we've got projects that we're pursuing that are tied to the eVTOL world, the electric vertical takeoff and landing. And a lot of the work that AeroX has done historically is around that kind of technology. So there's a symbiosis between the airports there as well. And then the other thing I would say is the training piece, this pilot training piece is huge. And so the training academy that's out here and at GSO, very, very important to be generating a pipeline of pilots moving forward. And finally, in the community college system in this state, if one county has a certain offering, so let's just say Guilford County, GTCC has for ages had airframe and power plant mechanics, A&P mechanics. Adjacent counties are not supposed to offer that same offering because the idea is that you're going to probably pirate from the adjacent county. Guilford Tech and Forsyth Tech work together to set up Forsyth Tech's new program, and that's because everybody sees that this is a rising tide that's lifting all of these ships, and we need more training. And so for that activity here, I think that's going to be so important, especially if we get, there's 10 companies in line right now looking at the airport. 10. 5 of them, pie in the sky stuff, not going to happen. But 5 of them, I like our chances on all 5 of them, especially on 3 of them. If we get any 3 of those, we're going to need a lot more people. And I think that training program and the connection between the 2 of them and the way that they're working together is really valuable.
What you're explaining now is something I didn't really know, but the counties are working together from what you're saying. It sounds like a rising tide will lift all boats. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Graham.
Go ahead.
Just a short question regarding the statistics on location of residence for the employee base.
Yes.
You specifically noted that when you were talking about the Guilford figures, you were talking about either in Greensboro X, in High Point Y, or elsewhere in Guilford County, the third. I assume the same applies to Winston-Salem versus the rest of Forsyth County. So it would include both those residing in unincorporated areas as well as in the smaller municipalities.
That's correct. What the data showed in the first time that we did it, when there was 20% in Forsyth County, half of those also lived in Winston-Salem. And half of them were out in the county somewhere.
Thank you.
Did I answer your question?
Yes.
Maybe a quick question on passenger service. I suspect before the pandemic you had X number of direct flights places, because a lot of folks are changing planes in the big hubs. If they can avoid it, they'd love to. How do those numbers compare kind of before the pandemic and now in terms of direct flight options?
Yeah, they're down. They're definitely down. So we were at 14 or 15 direct cities in 19, and we were struggling then, honestly, because this industry at that time, this industry was already fighting this pilot problem and equipment shortages. So they didn't have enough planes to fly routes. And so an example, we had Spirit Airlines that was here serving 2 markets in Florida. But then they decided to open up a RDU operation, and they ended up taking our airplanes and running it out of RDU because they did not have enough airplanes to add it. So they pirated ours because they were probably able to get average higher fees over there, and that's how we lost it. The good news is that they are buying a lot new airplanes, and there's going to be a lot more airplanes coming online. And when those come on, they're going to need places to put them. So I think that's going to be helpful. So of the 15 or 16 cities we had before, there's probably 10, 12 right now. We're definitely down in Dulles, Minneapolis, one in Florida. Yeah, I can't remember them all off my head. We have a person who does nothing but takes care of all of that stuff. But I think that they will be back because the demand is there. It's just they don't have the airplanes to fly them or the crews. So I think that will be back. It's just going to take a little bit of time. And then we're still pursuing Denver, for instance. We lost Denver after we lost an airline we had here back in 2011 or 12, Frontier Airlines, if you remember them. And we think that we can get Denver back, and we're going to really be pushing hard for Denver. Boston's another one. There's somebody in this room right now, probably, who would bellyache at me that we don't have direct service to Boston. Get it all the time. It's our single biggest market that we do not have direct service to. The airlines mark this in a thing called PDUs, passengers daily each way. So that's the average number of people who want to fly between two markets, and a market means an airport. So, a market is from here to LaGuardia, New York. There's also a market from here to Newark in New York. But so if I use LaGuardia as an example, there's about 300 people a day who want to fly from here to LaGuardia. There's also 300 people who want to fly from LaGuardia back to here. Now, it's not the same people. They're not going up and back same day every time. But that's just the average number. So the airlines look at these numbers in all of our markets. So Boston for us, I think, is 97, 95, something like that. Big enough to handle one flight a day in a large regional jet. You put a 90-seater jet in there, they can be full and fly it back and forth. But they have to get that airplane back and with the crew. And, I think that as long as we don't end up in some kind of other crisis, world crisis, whatever it might be, I hope that these will start to be coming back by the end of the year.
Chairman Martin, I have one question.
Yeah, please.
Is PTI cooperating? First, let me say good afternoon and thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
Is PTI cooperating with school districts to help kind of guide us on a path to providing more pilots?
Yes, that's a great question. There's actually an even larger umbrella organization, the Piedmont Triad Partnership, that is really kind of taking the lead with workforce development. And then everybody and their brother in the state is doing workforce development programs. And I think their job is to try and, okay, let's pull in the same direction, everybody, But one big part of that is reaching deep down into the schools, all the way down to the, primary education schools, to try and get interest. And there's been some real, very good responses from some of those schools and programs. There's Andrews High School in High Point has a program that's been in place for probably 15, 16 years now. And they send people both into the pilot thing, but also into airport management or into the maintenance side of things. And it's working really well. But it's really funny you ask this question because I'm always talking to people about helping people get into this industry because we need them. And I just this morning set up meetings with HACO and with Cessna for a young man who, believe it or not, lives in Michigan, but he's the nephew of the guy who runs RDU. And that guy called me and said, this guy wants to get into aerospace, and can you get him tours of these places? So he's going to come down and go through that. And GTCC is just they're an amazing partner. They will just take these kids, hug them, say, here's the way this works, and they'll show them all of the options, and then let the kids kind of pick what they want and then guide them towards that. And there's cost options. There's some that you can get it done for practically free and be done in 12 weeks. There's other programs where you get full certification that can take nearly 2 years, 18, 19 months. But yes.
I would say, ironically, my office is actually located inside of Andrews High School because I work for Guilford County Schools.
Yeah.
And I had a conversation with Dr. Goss, who is the principal, about trying to really leverage the Aviation Academy. To your point, it has been there for a while, and I would, be precautious to say, but, in our authenticity, say that we have not leveraged that academy throughout Guilford County and probably the Triad area as a way to produce more pilots or people who go into the field of aviation. So I hope that we could start having more, hard conversations with superintendents around the need for pilots and just people going into this field. It could really help this area.
I agree, 100%.
Kevin, one of my favorite moments of a county commissioner was serving on the authority. And of course, when I was there, first got there, you were not the director, but then not long after that, the director retired. And so I was appointed to the search committee to find a director for the authority. And it was our lucky day when you came in for an interview, and you just struck a chord with everybody, and we were so lucky that you accepted our offer. And you've certainly completed the mission that the authority had, and you've done a great job. And I'm not sure everybody realizes what all you've done for the airport, but I'd like this board to know that you have really taken that airport in a different direction. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Very kind. There's a whole bunch of people behind me who are, and above me, who are, share all that responsibility. So not just.
Do we have other questions? Thank you so much for taking time. This has been a great update and a lot of interest. We could probably go on, but thank you very much for being here. Great presentation, great update. And Graham, always a pleasure to see you. And appreciate you bringing it over and introducing Kevin here. Maybe we can do this again in another 6 months to a year.
Anytime. And also, you know, if you would want to have one of your briefing sessions and do it in our boardroom, I don't know whether you're allowed to do that by your rules, but bring this group over to our boardroom, and then we'll take you on a tour, and we can give you the deep dive. I'd love to do that with all of you. So, or again, individually, if anybody wants a tour, give me a call.
Great offer.
Thank you all.
Thank you all. All righty, we're going to have also a presentation by Tommy Krantz, the finance officer at Winston-Salem County Schools, on a quarter-cent sales tax issue. It was a little follow-up from, I think, what we had in about November or so.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. So I was asked to give a quick update on Article 46, so it'll be very brief, but I think to the point. If you look in 2019, Forsyth County Schools were paying supplements. At that time, we were ranked 20th in the state, and we were paying $24.2 million a year for those supplements. In 2020, we were ranked 18th. At that time, it rose to $28.2 million, and then Article 46 came in. When Article 46 came in 2021, we went to a ranking of 8th in the state, $35.2 million, and Article 46 was $17.5 million is what we received. In 22, we slightly backed up to 10th with $45.1 million. 17.187, that does not include the 1.925 that y'all appropriated, I think, 2 meetings ago, because we haven't officially received it yet. And at that point, it'll be recognized into revenue at that time. What questions? I mean, I was asked to give you a brief overview. This kind of tells you where the dollars are. You can see what we were spending prior to Article 46. You can see what we're spending after Article 46. On the teacher side, our supplements have gone from, in 2019, $4,251 on average to a teacher. It went to $4,309 in 2020. With this Article 46, it jumped to $5,614. 22, it increased to $5,868. I anticipate that the 2023 supplements will be about $55 million at this time, if not slightly a little bit higher. Any questions I can answer for y'all?
Go ahead.
Briefly, I would assume that you're talking about classroom teachers only and for these supplements, not other classified staff.
It's all classroom principals, assistant principals, as defined by the state.
I'm sorry.
The state requires us to pay supplements also on principals and assistant principals.
So this would be principals, assistant principals, and
Everybody
classroom
in a school
teachers.
building would not be personnel outside of a school building.
But only principals, assistant principals, and teachers.
Correct.
Thank you.
I I think, I know we just received, excuse me, was there another question?
No. I want to go back to Dan's question.
Go ahead.
Dan asked- I'm sorry if I wasn't clear, just so that I can clarify what Dan was asking
Yes,
you
ma'am.
in terms of the staff. You just said that it was inclusive of everyone in the building. Was that
From an
incorrect?
instructional,
In the
as defined by the
instruction.
STRAM, yes, ma'am. And I
Okay, fair.
apologize, but I
That's
needed to
okay.
add that
No,
word
no,
instructional.
I just wanted to be clear. People
Yes, ma'am,
are
you did.
listening
And when I
and
heard you
watching.
ask it, I said, yeah, no, I
Okay.
was,
No
I did
worries.
not mean to. I
No
apologize.
worries at all, sir. Thank you.
I know, in fact, your audit report, we just received copies of it, and I guess a question that I have had is, I think your fund balance is roughly 16 plus or so million, and something I'm very curious about, and I think my fellow commissioners share this, is of their fund balance, what percent of that is left over Article 46 money? I think that's the first
Okay,
question.
so on fund balance, we're at 20 million. We have $4 million that's set aside by state statute in the general fund. So that does leave us $16 million unrestricted in that fund. If you look at the difference between in 2021, we see the increase. I would say we're probably $10 million, maybe even 11, that we've received in Article 46 that is greater than what the payments went out on the growth side. That's a rough-
Just looking at your chart, see if I'm doing my, I have to be very careful in testing my assumptions. I think we all make lots of assumptions, and then those assumptions become
Right.
facts. So I want to test an assumption that I'm making about basically the supplement cost. On your 2020 figure of 28,248,000, I'm assuming that is on your pay stubs, as I understand it now. You actually have kind of, I don't know what you call it, but old supplement and Article 46 supplement. You have two pay stub items. So is it fair to, my assumption is that the school board's commitment of 28,248,038 basically now will remain the same in the future? That essentially that is the school board's commitment that will stay the same, and then the Article 46 supplement is what's coming in to pay more. The school board's budget is not adding supplement dollars, they're using Article 46
Correct.
dollars.
You're not building.
So that's a
I think
right,
that's a
correct
fair-
assumption.
I think that's how I would look at it.
All right, correct assumption. So just using what you have presented here, you can see that from 2020 to 2021, there's basically a $7 million increase. And during that year of 2021, you received $17 million. So you basically have left over about $10 million. And I assume that $10 million is about what you're in, and if you look at what you paid this year, the
Right.
$45 million, you can, I mean, kind of money's money shifting between fiscal years, but you could almost see the $10 million that was left over took you from 35 to 45. So at the end of this year, you should pretty much have the 17 million plus the 1.9, which is 19 million. You should have 19 million left over on the June 30th, 2023.
On a theoretical basis, I'd agree with you. Now, knowing our numbers and where everything's been spent, I would tell you that's probably not going to be the
Yeah,
case.
it could be more, it could be less, but it seems more likely with the age of the staff getting younger, basically, which seems to be the case. I would argue that your supplement dollars left over will be more instead of less. Now, obviously, if you hired a lot more expensive people, it could change, and it clearly changes in one regard every day. I mean, every day that you hire a new person, another person leaves. But in the big picture, it's probably going to be, roughly in those kind of amounts. So, I think I have two concerns.
Okay.
One is that you create a reserve account for the remaining or leftover, if you will, Article 46 money. I think that's just on your audit report now, which I just looked at last week. There should be, and that where it's coming down in fund balances, and it gets to that unrestricted 16 million, there should be above that, basically a Article 46 fund balance that shows what remains in that. because the intent, I believe, absolutely, was that all of those Article 46 dollars, I mean, we all told the public it's going to go, in fact, we actually said it's going for teacher salaries. I can probably go to the issue of principals, assistant principals, but that basically school-level staff, professional staff, that's where it's going to be, and it's not going to be paying anything else. And if that's reserved, then we know how much is left in it. And then from your all standpoint, as you want to make adjustments in your supplement schedule, you are probably, and this is just an opinion of mine, is that you don't need you don't need a whole year's worth of Article 46 revenue basically sitting in the bank waiting for the rainy day. I think there is going to be some rainy days as we look ahead the next 5 years, and you don't want to spend all of it, but it's what is the Goldilocks rule? What is the just right amount that you need to save? Because if you spend it all, you'll be reducing it.
Right.
And clearly, you want to avoid reducing it unless the board feels like they're in a position to increase it, which, knowing all the other pieces of the budget, I don't see that as a likelihood. So
Agree with you there.
so I think the next supplement schedule gives you an opportunity to actually pay some money and have something less than a year's worth of money left over, basically.
Yeah, I would anticipate.
So are you committed to my first issue?
I'm committed to the
The
idea.
reserve. I'm not interested in an idea.
I know, but I know my numbers. And so if I'm going to create a negative fund balance, I can't agree with.
I'm not asking that. I'm asking you to take the
But-
surplus.
But based off of what I know the numbers are today, budget to actuals, if I committed and said I'm going to have a $17 million reserve, I can't do that.
No. What I'm interested in is that when you reconcile, like for example, in June 22, last June, at the end of July 1,
Right.
2022, as the books are reconciled, whatever you received in Article 46 basically goes into, is reserved. That's a part of your reserve, your available fund balance to spend. That's a part of that's a subset of your fund balance. So
Correct.
in my idea of the 10 million left over, you'd have roughly 10 million in that Article 46, and you'd have a fund balance of about 6 million, which, by the way, was what your fund balance was the year before.
Correct.
So that sort of fits. We don't want you to make a commitment to something in the future.
Okay.
I want you the commitments that it will be reserved, and in next year's audit report, we're going to, for the 2023, FY 2023, we're going to see a reserved account for Article 46 supplement dollars that have yet to be spent.
I agree with you. The only one thing I asked for, that is subject to my board agreeing to that. I mean, I'm the CFO and I can make the recommendation, but at the end of the day, I'm not a school board member. So it's got to be, and I would anticipate the board would be fine with it. I'm not in any way saying they won't be, but it is subject to board approval.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, and I suspect I'm not going to say what I think my colleagues might be thinking. I will not repeat that, but I would just say I would be surprised if that were a problem.
I would agree with you, but you understand where I'm coming from.
I got you.
I have to respect.
I got you. And so the other part is more, I hope you'll be, this is a hope part, and this is a board issue. I hope you'll be addressing a $10 million leftover supplement part, that you'll be addressing that piece as you prepare your next supplement schedules.
We will definitely, sir.
Because some of us will be meeting with some Teachers Association folks this month in a little sort of get together.
Right.
And if that's not the first question, it'd probably be the second.
I got you.
About that issue, and I will, if I were answering the question, I would offer my opinion of what I hope will happen, but obviously I'll make it clear that as a Board of Education decision, but I'd certainly comment.
I would think that we will be in compliance. We will be in agreement with each other.
I apologize for saying so much, but go ahead. Go ahead.
The thing you've said today that bothers me most, and this is certainly not a reflection on principals or assistant principals, but the county commissioners voted to put the referendum on the ballot. And we told folks that it was a 1/4 cent sales tax for teachers. I knew I kept this hat for some reason. It bothers me. It really does trouble me. And it's not an insult. Please know it's not an
No, I
insult
understand.
to principals and assistant principals. They have tough jobs, and I understand. But I personally told voters that it was for teachers.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I did too. And I also happen to know that the state the state of North Carolina made a huge adjustment in principal compensation about 3 years ago. And that improved overall compensation. And I happen to know, just from rankings, you're giving us the rankings of where we are in teacher supplement. I know our principal supplement ranking is about third in the state. And now perhaps I know why. That apparently that's a piece of that. And I think that issue is maybe some misunderstanding, but I think that is also a correctable issue.
That's
for
a
the
very
future.
easy, because the principals and assistant principal, the amount of the total is very immaterial.
It'd be nice to see that amount maybe the next time we have a little
You're fine.
conversation.
Yes, sir. But it is immaterial.
That would be good. Oh, I mean,
Yeah,
I
agree.
the
understand
numbers of people
what you
are,
both are saying, but from a dollar standpoint, I think that would be,
Yeah.
to break it out, basically that's what we'd be doing away from Article 46. I think that would not be difficult to do.
yeah, because you're really looking at only probably less than about 250 people compared to 4,000.
Correct. And
So-
you're
so that's
looking
not
at
a lot
less
of
than $2
people.
million.
But to adjust out, I agree. But I think that would be, I think we're all about pure intent.
And that would be fine. I think we could definitely split it up like that with no problem.
And one of the things we have agreed to in our supplement is that there's a retirement match that goes along with that. And we do understand, I understand it. And everybody understands that's about it's now nearly 24% retirement match, but that is a direct result of the additional supplement dollars, and it does benefit teachers. So I have no conflict over that.
We don't have
And by the way, that is a factor because your supplement cost, I do not know whether your supplement cost is including the retirement match or not.
Or it does. It's the actual
That's what I
cost.
thought. I was hoping it did. Okay.
So it's 24.5 right now.
Other questions? I'm looking both ways here.
No, I was pointing to you all.
All right, go ahead.
Yes, thank you for coming over to share the update around Article 46. And I do agree with Dr. Martin about just making sure that we can, definitively see the Article 46 dollars that is going to where, the bond intended for it to go. And so I think that's just, I think we would all like to see that level of transparency. So I can appreciate that. What I will say is that I understand absolutely where Commissioner Wisenhunt is coming from as it relates to the intention of the bond. And I will say that I am clearly on record before we went down this path that in Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools, there is a culture of we are all educators. And I was very intentional on the school board saying and really advocating on behalf of all the educators to the county commissioners at the time that we may want to word it a little different than just teachers, because there is a culture and climate in Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools that we're all educators. The teachers don't want you to see them differently than the folk that's doing other things in the buildings. And so I said this may create a little anxiety around the school district. And so, ideally, I hope that there will be consideration or reconsideration on the part of the commissioners based on where we are right now, that the ordinance language can be changed or adjusted so that there is flexibility around educators versus just teachers. And I know that that is something that, I, as a commissioner, I think that it's worth us looking at.
Any other comments or questions?
Yes, sir. Thank you. First, thanks again for providing the briefing. I would concur. I have heard the same distinction made between or I should say lack of distinction made from teachers, literally from teachers speaking to me about the need for stronger supplements for some of their fellow educators as well. But I am interested in what I may simply be ignorant of in terms of the state classifications. If presumably you are honoring this commission's intent as expressed in its documents about what the supplements or what the Article 46 money is provided, for which purpose it is provided, on what grounds is it that you include principals and assistant principals, but not, for example, counselors and bus drivers, for which you have an ongoing shortage?
As defined by, well, I mean, it's a definition by the state. You know, we report our numbers on supplements for what's called SS 300, and that's what the data that I've shared with y'all came from. In collecting the SS 300 data, we separated between our teachers, our principals, and assistant principals. So that's why when Ms. Wisenhut expressed the desire to split it, it's easy to do because we capture it. We have it at our disposal. Being able, though, to go from 3,700, 3,800 teachers to saying now you're going to pay 8,000 employees, that would be financially, I don't see how this district could do that.
Well, I'm not getting into that debate right now. What I am asking, though, is doesn't the state in the legislative actions distinguish between teachers and other educators?
Correct.
So-
In their allotment process, yes, sir, they did.
So when the state says we are doing thus and so with teacher supplements, they are talking literally about classroom teachers, are they not?
As they define, yes, sir, in what they call PRC 01, you're correct.
And I think counselors are in the teacher category.
There are others, but I'm not as, I wish I had been
Psychologists
here
aren't,
during.
but I think teachers are. But I think counselors are. The operational
It's very
part is-
broad, it's very broad, and it has categories for, a number of other categories that may fit within it. I use teachers because it's the main group. But you could be right, and we can easily respond to y'all in an email on that.
If you could check on that.
That's
thank
fine, we can do that very quickly.
Other questions?
Yes, Chairman. I have a few questions, and then I need some support from Gordon. So I'll go ahead and start with getting you preface, Gordon, with my question. The resolution that we passed, can you pull that up? Because I want to be able to gather the information that we said in the actual language. So thank you again. We've all said thank you for being here, but I especially thank you the most, and it's because of the numbers. I knew that the school board was a tad bit off, but I didn't know to a tune of how much. So I appreciate you for providing that information. I have often said that I wanted to be conservative around our dollars, but I think I would better be able to say that I should be more conscious. And that's something that I would like for the school board. In the past, from my experience in the last 4 years, I've talked to many of them, and they weren't quite clear in terms of where their budgets were. But with this, we're able to kind of see where we're going and where we've come from. And first of all, not to be appreciated for the things that we have done is kind of disheartening. We do a lot, and we want to be able to help them. And even with the work that they're providing in terms of maybe the supplements that we might be providing them in the future, buildings, like we need to know at the tune of what costs, right?
Right.
And without us knowing, you're just saying that you want something, but you don't know how much it's going to cost you. And you're asking us, so how are we supposed to know? So it's those types of things that, I'm hopefully that they're hearing and they're listening today. And they'll be able to bring back in our meeting that we have scheduled with the Forsyth County Association of Education during that forum on the 22nd from 6 to 8. Now, Gordon, I'll come back to you. Can you share with us again the language that was proposed for the during the election.
So there are different documents. The
last
resolution was broader in the sense that it was to be used for education purposes. The money was to be sent to the Forsyth County school system.
And that we clarifying that we weren't the ones who made the language. It was the language that was submitted from the state, right?
Well, no, that's a different issue. On the ballot, we
On the
couldn't
ballot.
specify any use.
Right.
Okay, it was just a quarter-cent sales tax, which on the ballot, the board was not limited to any use. It could be sent to the school system, it could be used to build buildings or whatever, but you, as a board, stated that it would be used for teacher supplements. So what you've done each year when you pass the budget each year, at the end of the budget is a document called the budget ordinance. And in that, there is a specific section which says, it's section 15 of the current budget. And it says, it is the intention of the Forsyth County Board of Commissioners that teacher supplement payments funded by the county be used solely to supplement teacher compensation. And then it talks about the Article 46 sales tax. So in the budget each year, you communicate to the school system that you want this Article 46 money to be used solely for teacher supplements.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. So, sir, with that being said, when they have excess and they're putting it in the fund balance to redirect it to their general funds, that's, in my opinion, is unacceptable. It was supposed to be used for what it's used for, and that's what I want.
Right, and remember, I'm the new kid on the block.
Yeah. No, I get it. I totally understand, and I'm not harping on you. I'm just sending a message, that's all. Sharing a message.
And understood.
Thank you so
understood.
very much. I appreciate you.
Understood.
And that's all I have.
I just want to say that, in all fairness to the school district, I think that there has never been misuse of the dollars as it was intended. I think what we're saying today is, for the good of the public, we just want to be very clear and transparent that there is a line item that's about the reserve for Article 46. And I think that that's fair and it's cooperative and it's all good. But I would be very precautious around putting out an assumption that there is misuse by way of intent or non, and either one is, I would agree, not acceptable. I do think that we need to also be considerate around, clearly, as a commissioner board, as a school board, none of us are experts in budgets. We rely on the expertise of yourself and others on staff to help us to understand the budget, and then it's presented. We vote on it with all good, intention that you're presenting to us what is, acceptable and is according to the law. So I think it is, it gives me some angst around when we say that the school board doesn't understand the budget. I think that school board members by law have to support the budget based on the presentation from you and the superintendent. And, that board is, again, ideally making the vote based on what the expertise is being brought before them. So I would just ask for a little, grace on that level. But again, in working together, as county commissioners and school board, just keeping the, lines of communication open and being as transparent as possible, I think we'll move in the right direction. And I would, lastly, I would say this, if there is conversation around $10 and $15 million left over from year to year, I don't understand why there isn't some consideration if we willed it to be so that the dollars could go to, classified in addition to teachers. But,
Yeah, so I would like to say, Dr. Woodbury, thank you for your comments. They're heard, but with all due respect, I would say that part of our role and responsibilities as elected servants is to research and resolve all information that's given. Yes, we rely on the business and education and history of staff, but still yet the responsibility falls on our shoulders. So I'm hopeful, and we've always had a pretty good relationship with the school board. I think that, again, our forum is going to bring out a lot of information, but there's too much misinformation in the community, and that's what we want to be able to stop and show them that they do have access and they're not as in the negative as that they think that they are. So thank you for allowing me to
Chairman.
share.
Yes.
I do have some thoughts, but I'm not going to, what I'm going to do is what I believe to be the facts, I'm going to check and make sure that they are, and then at a later date, when I'm sure of what are the facts, then there are some things that I want to say.
Mr. Chairman, if I may just make one data request, that
Okay.
would be helpful. I'm sure this information is publicly available somewhere, and apologies for asking someone else to find it for me, but could you provide a breakdown of the total employees of Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools, the number of teachers, the number of principals, assistant principals, and the various other classified staff,
Not a
including
problem.
counselors, nurses, psychologists, bus drivers, and such?
Correct.
Thank
Not
you.
a problem.
Thank you.
Good. And I think clearly on the supplement portion, I think the intent was on the teacher supplement piece, it's all the people that meet the definition of a teacher. And that's where I think counselors meet the definition of a teacher, whereas psychologists do not, nurses do not.
Right, but the number of being about 3,800 is going to be teacher.
Yeah.
The
But I mean,
majority
I'm
of
talking
that-
about definitional issues of who is a teacher, which is a state definition.
State definition.
Yeah. No, that's good. Healthy discussion today. Appreciate it. Anything else for the good of the order? If not, we want to thank you,
Thank you.
Tommy, for being here.
Bye.
Thank you. Can we take a 5-minute recess, please? We stuck pretty close to our 5 minutes. That's great. Mr. County Manager, we are now ready to begin the briefing session.
All right, very good. We do have some items for consideration for the meeting for March 16th, and so you already heard from Chris Murphy the first go-round. I know he's taken into account some of your concerns. Turn it over to Chris.
Thank you, Mr. County Manager. Good afternoon, Chairman, Madam Vice Chair, members of the Commission. I'm probably not going to go into great depth with this briefing, since we did go over this last time. But just as a general reminder, UDO CC-17 was in relation to the Winston Weaver fire, trying to look at ways to put some additional land use controls in place for manufacturing uses that are potentially dangerous. We did look at our peer communities. We did vet this with the Planning Board and with the Winston Weaver Task Force, which was the City Council's Public Works Committee. We ran a number of things through them. And at the end of the day, in looking at our peer communities and the regulations that we landed on, we do find ourselves consistent with them. This is that chart that is in your packet now, and also that I went over last week. At the end of the day, in our current UDO, fertilizer plants are, again, classified as manufacturing C, only allowed in GI. We did look at chemical and battery manufacturing as being dangerous uses, and again, those are only allowed in GI. There were some provisions dealing with watershed that are currently in the ordinance. And looking at how we could go and try to make things safer, we did look at both chemical manufacturings for pesticides and fertilizer, and agricultural chemical manufacturing, and explosives and pyrotechnics. In the draft ordinance that went to Planning Board and City Council that was adopted, we also did include battery manufacturing uses, primary battery manufacturing and storage battery manufacturing, which is the initial version that came to the commissioners. Again, just looking at some of the use-specific standards, to have one of these subsets of manufacturing C, it would require special use district rezoning that would come to the elected body. We did look at some minimum acreages, some minimum setbacks from the property edge for primary operations of the facility, and allowing parking within the inner 300 feet of that 400-foot spacing, but there would have to be a 100-foot perimeter buffer from any activity. Security wall and fencing, landscaping. As far as the process, again, we did spend several months vetting this, researching it, speaking to Greater Winston-Salem, Inc. We did take a version to Planning Board, and the city did adopt regulations that were in your initial packet. Whenever I briefed this at my quarterly update back in February, and then also whenever I presented this at the first briefing last week, there were some concerns voiced by the commissioners related to the inclusion of battery manufacturing that was in the Planning Board's recommended version. So as a result of that, staff did include an alternative version of the text amendment that was in your revised packet for this week, that included, that removed the battery manufacturing component from the proposed text amendment. And again, from a staff perspective, again, I'm here presenting what the Planning Board recommends, which is the full text amendment. But if there is a desire for the commissioners to remove the battery and storage, the primary battery manufacturing from the text amendment, staff believes that the most important element is the fertilizer and chemical manufacturing component, along with the pyrotechnics manufacturing. And so if the commissioners want to consider that alternative, that's what we would prefer versus a straight denial. Again, a public hearing was held at the Planning Board meeting in October. Planning Board did vote 6-2 to recommend approval. Again, of the two folks who voted against it, one thought it went too far, one didn't think it went far enough. It was adopted by City Council on December 5th, 2022. And with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions for Chris?
I have a question and then an observation, I guess. I guess To me, one of the main keywords in here is manufacturing, and then you're focusing on fertilizer. Once it is manufactured, then storage of the manufactured product, then is that outside of the manufacturing?
Yes.
Okay, well, just as an observation about, I'll have to think about it more, but the observation I have is about the fertilizer plants. Probably this is just in effect saying there's no need to come here. And given this, it's not likely that anybody will, if it was much, or even want to. There are some small, I think probably, well, I don't know what happened other than it burned. I don't know why it caught on fire. I don't think the fertilizer itself did, but what the concern was after the fire was started that there could have been a explosion. Well, you got some, not here, not in this county, there are some smaller operations that I mentioned last time we talked about this, and they're what is called blended of the three components of fertilizer. They're just mixed together. This plant was what's called an ammoniated plant. It's heat process, and there's not but a few of them left in the country, all of the states, and if something happens to one, usually not built back, but not like that. They do this blending process, but in a lot of counties, I wouldn't every county across the state, but in the east probably there's some kind of production facility of fertilizer. I wouldn't call it manufacturing because I don't know whether the definition of mixing, whether that's manufacturing or just putting stuff together. I'll check on that. I just can't remember all of these things. Maybe I ought to ask the manager. He'd know right off. So I guess that's about all I have to say about that. As far as batteries, just for some observation, if you want to know more about batteries, look at the internet and read about it. I did. I'll leave it at that. So you can come to your own conclusions. And we did have I don't know how big it was in size. We did have a manufacturing plant here for many years, Douglas, over there on the south side, and way back in I think that facility is a distribution plant now for batteries. Most comes out of Pennsylvania, and batteries, I don't guess the first ones, but there was a Jarvis battery right up here on North Liberty Street. It's a little small place, and then he never did, he knew how to do the stuff, but he just didn't get to going, and the Douglas people did. So I could tell you some more, but I'll stop there and save some time. All of us, it's 5 minutes of all of us' time. That's a lot.
I would like to follow up on one thing that Commissioner Linville said. Was it not true in the Weaver plant that there was a lot of manufactured material on site in the feeder, a lot of the feeders, some in train cars and other, maybe whatever, that there was a feeder of the fire and the explosion from the manufactured product that's already manufactured. I assume it's very volatile also, or no?
It's my understanding the biggest fear for the Weaver fire was the
Just the ammonium
storage
nitrate.
of the material of the
raw
raw
materials.
ammonium nitrate prior to it being made into pelletized fertilizer. They have a separate storage facility. They had, I'm not sure if it's past tense, I'm not sure if they have depleted but they had a separate storage facility of pelletized fertilizer, but it's my understanding that the pelletized fertilizer, again, I think there's a way that you can concoct something with it and make it dangerous, but the more dangerous element in this particular situation were the train cars of
Ammonium nitrate.
liquid ammonium nitrate.
That's coming back to me. I got it. So I can understand why storage is not the issue of the manufactured product. It's the
Right,
ingredients.
once manufactured, not stored, but the
it's the
storage
ingredient
of the
issue.
raw materials,
I
yes.
got it. Any other questions for Chris?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. All right, agenda item 2 is approval of the minutes for the meeting of March 2nd. Those will be coming to you, Madam Clerk.
I'm going to try to get them out tomorrow.
Very good. So be on the lookout for those. Item 3 is an amendment to the 2022 PAYGO Capital Projects Ordinance. You've got an associated amendment to the 2020 Motor Vehicle and Mobile Equipment Replacement Capital Projects Ordinance. Christopher Ong, who is our internal audit and finishing out his audit manager and finishing out his work as a senior budget person. I appreciate him helping us out, getting us through this budget as he takes on dual duties, but he'll review.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chair, members of the board, good afternoon. On December 1st, 2022, the board adopted the 2022 PAYGO Capital Projects Ordinance, appropriating funds for an authorized group of conceptual projects. That list includes an appropriation of $250,000 for the purchase of an ambulance. So what you have is 2 accompanying AB project amendments. And so your approval of this agenda item will essentially transfer that from the 22 PAYGO ordinance to Project 993260 in the 2020 Motor Vehicle and Mobile Equipment Capital Project Ordinance, which was established for emergency services, capital vehicle and equipment purchases. You have to answer any questions.
Any questions for Christopher?
Thank you, Christopher.
Thank you.
All right. Agenda item 4 is an amendment to the fiscal year 2022-2023 budget ordinance that appropriates revenue from the Juvenile Crime Prevention Council grantees to reimburse unspent funds from fiscal year 2022 to the North Carolina Department of Public Safety. Kyle Wolf, our budget manager, is going to review. Stan Clarkson with the state was here. He had to be on the road to be at another appointment at 3 o'clock, but I think there were some conversations before the meeting that hopefully clarified some things. Kyle.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. So this item is necessary to appropriate $7,847 that's been returned to the county by 5 organizations that received funding in the prior fiscal year through the Juvenile Crime Prevention Council. As you know, last year, the county had received a total of $940,852 from Department of Public Safety, Division of Juvenile Justice, to be allocated to organizations to develop community-based alternatives to youth detention centers, provide non-institutional dispositional alternatives that protect the community and juveniles, and provide community-based delinquency, substance abuse, and gang prevention strategies. This return of $7,847 means less than 1% of the county's FY22 allocations being returned to the state. Just as a comparison, Durham had their reversions were 2.6%, Guilford was 4.7%, Mecklenburg was 1.5%, and Wake was 2.7%. Like Dudley said, Rich was here to answer questions, but I'll try to answer any other questions you might have.
All my questions have been answered. Any other questions?
Thank you, Kyle. Agenda item 5 is an amendment to the fiscal year 2022-23 budget ordinance. It increases revenues and appropriations for the Forsyth County Department of Public Health. I'm going to let Nicole Pretty go into the details with this.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. The item before you is a budget ordinance amendment in the amount of $40,504. This amendment appropriates from the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services to the Department of Public Health's Women, Infant, and Children's Program with the Public Health Department. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions for Nicole?
Very, very brief and basic. So this is money coming from the state for this purpose.
Correct.
So this is basically this is kind of a rubber stamp of money that's coming from the state. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Commissioner Besser, you'll see these through the year where, we get an initial appropriation from the state that's part of our AA, our agreements, and then the new dollars flow into it now. So it's pretty routine.
Yeah, I'm used to seeing that kind of thing. At first, I thought we were appropriating an extra $40,000 out of local revenues for WIC, which I would be happy to support if that were needed. But it sounds like, no, it's actually money that came from the state. We just pass it. Thank you.
Yes.
Very good. All right, and item 6 is also Nicole, so she needs to stay there and introduce this grant resolution ratifying and authorizing acceptance of a grant from the Appalachian District Health Department.
Okay, so this item authorizes the acceptance and appropriation of a grant funds from the Appalachian District Health Department in the amount of $29,555. The Appalachian Health District Health Department has received ARPA grant money that it may distribute to local health departments, including Forsyth County Health Department. We intend to use this grant for the installation of drinking fountains at the Public Health Department site. We also are planning to use this money for mental health first aid training for all public health staff and for some office furniture in the Environmental Health Division. Any questions?
Any questions?
All right.
Thank you
Thank
very
you,
much.
Nicole. All right, very good. All right, we have a couple of ARPA items, so Aisha is going to come up and review these. Item 7 is a resolution of an agreement with Moji Coffee, and item 8 is one with Salvation Army. I'll turn it over to Aisha.
Thank you, County Manager. Good afternoon, County Commissioners. First one is a resolution for an agreement with Moji Coffee and More. Moji Coffee and More is requesting $75,000 to provide workforce development training to 2 Mojistas, that's what they call their employees, per quarter through December 2024, and host workshops for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Moji Coffee and More exists to provide meaningful and enriching employment to individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and will provide the following: one-on-one coaching, pre-employment training, mentorship, and continuous life skills to empower Mojistas with transferable skills to set them up for success. Any questions about that?
I was just going to add, Moji's not only on Trade Street, they're in that location, but they're also our vendor in the library. So if you go to the Central Library, you'll see a Mojista there.
And that is one Mojista working independently at their library location. The next one is a resolution for agreement with the Salvation Army. The Salvation Army is requesting ARPA funding in the amount not to exceed $330,000 to provide emergency financial assistance to disproportionately impacted residents in Forsyth County. The Salvation Army seeks to serve 250 unduplicated disproportionately impacted households and individuals having at or below 40% of the area median income in Forsyth County over a 2-year period through their emergency assistance program. The Salvation Army Emergency Assistance Services or program will screen applicants and upon eligibility help with the following: mortgage and rental assistance, first-time rental deposits, utilities, child care assistance, medical expenses, food assistance, incidentals, transportation, and life skills. Any questions about that?
Any questions for Aisha?
Yes, just one quick question. This Salvation Army, the location is on Trade Street?
Yes,
Okay,
it
I just wanted
is
to make sure.
1255 North Trade Street.
Thank you.
Other questions?
All right, thank you.
So how many contracts do we have still outstanding? Do you know?
Yes, I do. So we have 7 still in review and negotiating items. So, and then we have several of them in contract control, and we have 5 that will be presented to the board. So these 2 and 3, the next board meeting agenda.
Okay, so we're narrowing down with all these agreements and.
Well, I do have a question. So at what point do we decide that they can't get out of the barn, that we do something else differently? I know that we're really trying to help them, and I don't want to make any changes, but, you know, there's got to be a win.
Do you think any aren't going to get out of the barn? Yeah, that.
I think we're making, they're taking a while, but I think we're making.
Yeah, I don't
some
think,
leeway.
we hadn't, we sit down, Aisha has a.
I want to make sure that they have enough time to spend what they're allocated.
Yeah,
Right.
that's so, and, we have Aisha runs a great 30-minute fixed meeting on Wednesdays, and that we've been tracking this really closely, and, there are a few things we will find out about later. One of the contracts for the Highway 65 water line has $500,000 in it. We should know if those dollars will be needed early fall, and so that there's those dollars there. We're just going to have to kind of keep monitoring the spend. And then we've got the fallback mechanism where this board made the decision not to use revenue loss. And so we've got, I don't remember the exact number, but $7 or $8 million in revenue loss that, we can shift and use and claim it from the federal government so we don't lose that money. We're also monitoring the spend that we have going on right now. Perhaps in the next morning session, I think we've got an April morning session, we can give you a real detailed dive on what the spend looks like, but they're off and running, so.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Thanks, Aisha. Thank you. All right, got several contractual matters. Item 9 is a resolution authorizing an amendment to the Behavioral Health Crisis Services Revenue Agreement between Forsyth County and the state of North Carolina. Denise Price is going to review this one.
Good afternoon. You may recall that we have a revenue agreement with the state of North Carolina in the amount of $12.5 million that helps to provide funding through 2026, so long as it's obligated by the end of 2024, for behavioral health services, crisis services. We have a need to adjust the budget associated with that agreement to recategorize some of the dollars and also to shift some dollars from this fiscal year to next as we continue to evolve in our build out of the Holland Avenue Center. This will probably be not the last time that we'll need to make adjustments, not to the intent of what we're going to provide, but to the categories within that existing $12.5 million. So this item is to authorize the county manager to enter into an adjusted agreement and also for the authority to make adjustments in the future within the dollar amount and without substantial changes to the intent. Be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for
Sure.
Denise?
Thanks, Denise.
Thank you.
Agenda item 10, we can pull. I don't think we need board approval on that, and so we can just pull that one off the agenda. Item 11 is a resolution authorizing execution of a contract between Forsyth County and EPR Systems USA, Inc. to use fireworks record management software. Chris Vogler will review this one. He's with the fire department.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Before you use a contract with EPR Systems for their fireworks record management software, this contract's for 3 years, and it's not to exceed $203,269.95 for the period of the contract. What Fireworks is our record management software. It's utilized by 15 of our 16 contracted fire agencies, as well as the Emergency Services Fire Division. What it does is incident reporting. It keeps patient care records, maintenance, inventory, training records to meet the North Carolina Department of Insurance requirements. Also, for our division specifically, it manages our inspection and investigation modules or duties. And also, it provides a remote training platform for the fire departments, which was very useful during COVID. The contract was originally held by the Forsyth County Firefighters Association, and each of the fire departments would reimburse the association for the cost of their portion of the contract. What the association did during the fiscal year 23 budget process was ask that the Fire Service Overlay District take over the cost of the contract, since it benefited all of the fire departments in the system. And the funds were approved in the FY23 budget to do so. I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Is there a reason that you said there's one one entity, one fire department not using this software?
That is correct. The city of King has chosen not to get in with fireworks. They're the only ones that haven't, and actually, in the period that the association's been doing business with EPR systems, Kernersville Fire Department and the city of Winston-Salem has also switched over to this record management system.
They also use it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I got it. Thank you. Any other questions, by the way?
So there, this was we've been talking about this for a long time. This is something where, that's a very paperwork intensive process and all that, and uniformity across departments made some sense. And prior to the countywide overlay district, the only way to essentially do it is to have them paid kind of back into it. And as we looked at things that made sense to cover in the overlay district, because of you wanted them to have the uniformity, you also wanted them to buy the same version and have good, and it be uniform kind of across everything. And so that's I think it was a good move. So it was kind of a side benefit of the countywide fire tax district, and it can afford it.
So that actually saved a given volunteer fire department, I'm just doing it in my head.
Yeah.
Roughly $2,500 to $3,000 a year.
Yeah.
It was dependent on each fire department because there's a basic module that does just the incident reporting, but there's some add-on things that some fire departments said that they could afford and some say they couldn't afford. The good thing with this contract is they're getting all of that now. Every fire department is going to be equal across the board. But it, like you said, it could be, that $3,500, $5,000 up to about $10,000, depending on what those modules were.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate that. All right. We've got some tax matters. You've got item 12, which is a resolution approving refunds by the tax assessor and collector amount of $1,286.48 from the Board of Equalization and Review refunds. You've got the refunds that were the assessor refunds in the amount of $42,369.15. And then you've got the resolution acknowledging receipt of the tax collector's report of the total amount of unpaid 2022 taxes that are liens on real property and ordering the tax assessor to advertise such liens. John is back there. If for the benefit of the new commissioners, you might want to come up, talk just a little bit about the strategy that we use to publish those, because after y'all approve this is going to open things up for him to put people's names in the newspaper. And so how he does that might be helpful. So,
good afternoon, Commissioners. As the county manager stated, this resolution allows us to, or orders me to advertise unpaid liens for 2022 property taxes that are liens on real estate. What we have currently, the report that we had already provided to you in the first Monday in February, we had about 13,000 accounts that were unpaid for 22 taxes at that time. Today, we have about 10,000 accounts that are unpaid. What we do is, upon your approval at your next meeting, we will mail notices during the week of March 27th indicating to people that if they don't pay by a certain date that they will be advertised in the newspapers. The last day to pay without being advertised will be May 2nd. We'll have that in the instructions. And then we will plan to advertise in 4 newspapers during the week of May 8th. And for your knowledge, we advertise in the Winston-Salem Journal, the Winston-Salem Chronicle, the Clemens Courier, and the Kernersville News. Each account that ends up being advertised is assessed a $7.50 fee. Well, that was the fee last year. That goes on their tax bill, so they get to pay to have their own name in the newspaper. Just in some other related items, our collection rate so far this year, we're a little bit behind where we were a year ago at this same time, but we're currently at 97.94%. We're about $500,000 or so in county money behind where we were at this time last year, which is not an insurmountable amount.
Any questions for John?
I will say, I'm sorry.
John, will you, if nobody has questions on that, will you explain item 13?
Was that the $42,000 Yes. That is actually, it's one account. And it actually deals with Novant Hospital, the Clemens Hospital. It's a business personal property item. They actually listed what are some non-taxable business items. They listed those on their taxable account. So, and so we didn't, I mean, all we know is that they listed value with us on a certain account, and so we bill that. Whenever we billed it, they paid it. And now we understand through them and through their request for refund that those assets were actually non-taxable items and have proven such to us. And so that's why we bring that. Their request actually goes to you, and we're recommending your approval of that refund.
So do you want to talk, I mean, we generally think of both hospital systems as being fully exempt from taxes, but that's not true.
That's right.
It's not just the entity, but it's the purpose, right?
Right. That's right. So a lot of the doctor's offices that are standalone, they pay property tax on their assets. You could have capital leased equipment that the hospital uses that they pay taxes on, and there's some other things too. But majority is non-tax, but there are taxable items that the hospitals pay on.
I'll just add that part of that has to do with who owns the property. So if the hospital owns a property, it might be tax exempt, but if it's owned by a separate LLC, then it might have to pay taxes. So I think that's what we've run into with some of these doctors' offices.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, what item on the agenda contains?
13.
13?
13 is the one for the $42,000 refund, yes, sir.
Okay, so that's the amount of refund,
That's the amount of refund, and a lot of that is county or county affected through either the county itself or the fire district and the fire and the countywide fire district. It affects Clemens as well, so.
I just had a question, Chairman Martin, based on obviously being new, and I think that just as a citizen prior to coming on the commission, I would just always hope my name wasn't printed in the newspaper. Just to be quite frank with you, and it seems like, you know, as a citizen I guess, as from a commissioner standpoint, what is the impact of putting people's names in the newspaper and then they pay? And is that the only way that we could encourage citizens to pay than to put their name in the newspaper? Because let me say this lastly, my main concern is that this may be a tool that a lot of outsiders are using to come in and, you know, try to get property and then put back on the market, and, you know, affordable housing becomes less and less attainable.
We have a whole system of approach to collecting delinquent taxes, and so this is actually just one of the statutory items that we have to do. So it's not anything unique to Forsyth County or anything like that. Our intention in Forsyth is actually, we try to telephone call folks that owe us. And we try to help them to get those payments made, help them by working with them. There's a lot of other techniques that we can use, like we can garnish bank accounts, attach wages, attach rents, we can foreclose. And so we certainly have a hierarchy to how we proceed through that, with foreclosure being the ultimate and thing that we want to avoid the most. But it's still something that we use. And so the advertisement is just a statutory component that we need to do. I do know that it inspires some folks, because and that's usually why I tell you the last day to pay, is because we will have people come in on that exact day and pay, and won't pay until. And just so that, I guess, their money is their money until the last second before they go in the paper. We do have a history here. The requirement is actually that we publish in one newspaper. We have a history here that we publish in multiple papers. And so, for example, the Winston-Salem Journal has the full list of all the delinquent properties at that time. Whereas the Winston Chronicle they ask us for certain areas to cover, and so those lists are smaller. And same thing with Kernersville News and the Clemens Chronicle as well. If I answered your question.
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
this conversation has brought to mind a former member of this board who wanted people to know in Forsyth County that he was conservative. And at this time, he looked forward to getting his name printed in the newspaper. And he would wait until the last minute, and then he'd pay. Different strokes for different folks. But he lived by that, because if you didn't believe he was a conservative, he'd just show you the newspaper.
Any other questions for John?
Okay, you might want to stay right there for just a second. Of the reports, you've got two of them that are related to work that John's done. Item 15 and 16 are both Property Tax Commission appeal resolution orders. One's for Wachovia Structures LLC and Lowe's Home Center. And again, for the benefit of the new commissioners, kind of what happens.
Sure. So these are appeals that have gone beyond the Board of Equalization Review, and the appellant has chosen to go to the Property Tax Commission. As a part of that process, we work with the Department of Revenue staff to try to resolve cases as best we can. We certainly do have our share of cases that we have heard in Raleigh, but where it makes sense to see if we can work things out, we do. These are two of those. And so the Wachovia Structures appeal is a 21 reappraisal era appeal. That's the parking deck that was built in 2019 and 2020 there on Main and 3rd Street. That parking deck took about $8.5 million to construct. We had it appraised for about $8.2 million. The appellant was seeking a value of $2.6 million. It later sold in August of 22 for $4.4 million. So our order of $6 million we felt good about. Certainly, us doing a reappraisal on January of 21 certainly was difficult through COVID. And certainly, a parking deck in downtown, there's a lot of assumptions made in going into building such a thing at that time. And so we felt like that was a reasonable adjustment given the market value of that property as of 1/1/21. So that's the story on that one. And would you like me to speak on the other?
Interesting. Other one's interesting too. So.
Okay, all right. Okay. The Lowe's Home Centers is the other item. That is a 2017 reappraisal era PTC case. Lowe's has a long history now of appealing. And so this deals with the 6 properties they own, 4 of which are stores here in Forsyth County. We had a combined tax value of $55 million essentially on those 6 properties. They were seeking a value of $32 million, which would be about a 40% reduction. What we were able to come to a conclusion on was a $47 million value, which is about a 15% reduction. What that works out to is the average store is worth about $11.5 million. If you look at how other counties are valuing Lowe's and similar home improvement stores across the state, we're still either at the top or very near the top of price per square foot that we have on the stores, even at our negotiated value. We do have a 21 era appeal at the PTC with Lowe's as well. Our current value there is $52 million. We were with good work through Mr. Watkins, and we were able a long time ago to get a 2013 era case dismissed, and if you remember that. These are big cases, and there are times when I have to go ask the manager for assistance to hire outside appraisal help and things like that, and so they're very significant cases for us. And we're getting to meet a lot of folks at Lowe's through the last 16 years, so.
Just a quick, are the appellants in those cases, are they going and getting appraisers too?
Yes, a team of them, yes.
But when I read so it does appear there's a little bit of a split the baby issue on appraisals. I mean, it's not 50-50, but it obviously lands somewhere in the middle on those.
Yeah, and I mean, there are certainly cases we win at the PTC, but it's very difficult to come out, even when they are heard, it's very difficult to come out with where you started.
Yeah, and we, just to toot John and Gordon and Fred's horn, we are probably, we handle those in-house. We're not going outside attorney to do that, and of course, Gordon handled those for years, and Fred's picking those up, but we're the best in the state, hands down in that, so.
Good.
Yeah.
And I'll just, I appreciate John giving me credit for this, but this is purely Fred Johnson, Deputy County Attorney, who's been handling these cases lately. And he is really a bulldog and keeps after these people. And so and John's staff is excellent. So we really do have great results. We have much better valuations than Wake or Mecklenburg or Guilford because our appraisal staff is so good, and then we follow up with them. So it is a great team effort.
Good. Well, congratulations to both of you.
Thank you.
Good. Yeah, yes, it's David and Goliath when you go in there. You think about us and Lowe's, and and
it's good.
David wins, so it's good. Yeah, most of the time. All right. Item 17 is the Human Resources Report for the month of September through December of 2022. You'll notice we got to get the numbers flip-flop, but we employed 153 people during that period. We lost 197, and so we've got to keep moving. And then you'll see the reclasses, and then we go into great detail in that report. But we're working hard to try to reverse that trend. Mr. Chairman, that's all I have on the agenda. I did want to just mention that I got a chance to speak with Mr. Krantz in the break and just talk with him a little bit and try to translate what, make sure he was hearing what y'all were saying. And so what he's going to do, he's got it. And, what he's going to do is he's going to take his year-end audit and he's going to do kind of like Terry does when we get their audit. Sometimes she sort of recategorizes fund balance. And so he's going to recategorize that fund balance and show it with those designations that you're asking for. And, what I think Commissioner Linville heard, they will probably have a negative, about $1 million or so negative fund balance when they try to reserve, the dollars for Article 46. And, Mr. Krantz I think
that's assuming it's over 10 million.
I think it is. And so what that will do is it will go into budget at a point where, you'll see that and know that, and there'll be some catch-up work that has to be done.
Yeah.
He's fully intended to, he completely understands that's what you want to see, and that's what was being said to him is let's, good, bad, indifferent, let's show where the Article 46 spend was related to that, and then let's make sure we can show it. And I talked to him a little bit about how we use board designations and we use them as a transparency tool. And I talked to him a little bit about how important that was, particularly for things like the debt leveling plans where there's a lot of cash. It's going to be spent in a future year, but you really don't want to make sure you ever lose that. And I said that's exactly what they're after here in your audit. And so anyway, he'll get that to you. And but I think there's a lot going on in that school budget. There's a lot of transition that he has inherited and he's working through. But he's clearly wants to do the right thing and understands what you're asking.
Good.
Yeah. Commissioner Woodbury.
Chairman Martin, before we adjourn, I did want to just recognize that on Saturday, a few of the commissioners will participate in a women's History International Parade, and I'm excited about the parade because it is right in alignment with, I think, the county's vision around economic development, especially for MWBE participants, particularly women. So I look forward to seeing as many people in Forsyth County downtown at 1 o'clock this Saturday for the Women's International History Parade.
All righty. Anything else?
Move we adjourn.
All righty. We're adjourned.
That was quick.
Enjoy the program.